Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Physics by the River. Today I'm joined by Emma Gillard, a PhD student. How are you doing today, Emma?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm doing great, thank you. Yeah, nice to be on your show today.
I was hoping you could tell us kind of a bit about your project, maybe a bit about the physics behind it, and then tell us about the more general kind of PhD experience to kind of help inform people who are thinking about doing a PhD in their future, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm a second year PhD student at Durham University, and I'm doing an experimental PhD in superconducting magnets, but specifically like magnets used in fusion reactors. So yeah, my project is purely experimental, and I'm basically measuring the superconducting properties of these magnets and seeing if they'll be able to be used in fusion reactors. So I guess a little bit about fusion. So I'm working specifically on future energy. So nuclear fusion is something that's hopefully going to be a long-term solution to the climate crisis. So we're hoping for clean, large-scale amounts of energy as our fossil fuels run out and global warming becomes an issue. So yeah, so I'm specifically focused on trying to get that to work. But in order to get fusion to work, we need to confine this plasma to fuse the nuclei together, and we can find that plasma using magnets. And yeah, superconducting magnets are basically the best magnets you can use because, well, yeah, I guess they're expensive, but they're also very strong, very good at confining a plasma, and so they're much better to use than normal sort of iron magnets. But to use superconductors, you need to cool them down to very low temperatures, below what they call their critical temperatures, for them to work as magnets. And I'm looking at seeing how we can try and raise that critical temperature so we don't have to spend so much money on cooling the magnets. And yeah, that's basically a rough outline of what I do. Not sure if that is clear enough for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's quite clear. So what kind of things are you doing to try to lower this critical temperature?
Yeah, so basically I'm using this really fancy new tape that's sort of being produced on commercial levels at the moment, but it's still pretty expensive. But this magnet is really good because it has an exceptionally large critical temperature and a critical field. So that means it can produce really strong magnets, so 20 Teslas, which is an insane amount of magnetic field. And they can be cooled to about 90 Kelvin, and that's higher than the boiling point of liquid nitrogen. So we can basically use liquid nitrogen to cool these magnets. And as you know, liquid nitrogen is cheap as milk, really. It's a really cheap thing to cool and to use. So that's so much better than the magnets we currently use, which are, for example, niobium titanium, which uses liquid helium to because it has a critical temperature of 10 Kelvin, and it requires liquid helium to cool it. And liquid helium is as expensive as gold. It's probably an exaggeration, but it's so much more expensive than nitrogen. So yeah, so I'm using this high temperature, what they call a high temperature superconductor, and trying to make sure that under the extreme conditions of a fusion reactor, this critical temperature is still high so that we can use liquid nitrogen instead of liquid helium, basically.
Okay. So what are your kind of expectations for the end of your project? Do you think you might be able to actually kind of get these higher critical temperatures, or is it more kind of just exploring the possibility?
Yeah, so I think that's a really ambitious question, and I want to give an ambitious answer because I feel like I'm using tapes which are really cutting edge, and I think these are the superconducting tapes that they will use for future reactors. There's one called STEP that's being built in Nottinghamshire, and Demo, which is a European effort. So I'm hoping that at the end of my project I'll have investigated how these superconducting tapes operate under strains, because you get a lot of pulling and pushing of the magnets in a fusion reactor because of the Lorentz forces, very scientific, and the cooling causes lots of stresses and strains which affects the critical temperature. So hopefully I will, at the end of my research, I'll have investigated the strain applied to these tapes and see if that's affected their critical temperatures at all. But so far, I've found that the critical temperatures are still very high, despite them being, under so much strain and under extreme conditions of a fusion reactor. So it's looking good so far. So hopefully at the end of my PhD, I'll be able to say these tapes are suitable for use in future fusion reactors, which is like a major step forward for fusion, because these tapes produce very strong fields to confine the plasma, and they'll start to become cheaper as well as we make more of them. So I think that would be a great victory, really, but see how it goes.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed, yeah.
It's very sad to hear that material physics is unescapable in practical applications.
Oh, gosh, can't get away from material science. Being
Tragic.
a physicist, it hurts to do materials, but gotta learn about it. It's important.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about how it seems like superconductivity is something that's really quite important in your research. So is that something that you got much experience looking at in your undergraduate degree, or was it kind of new when you were going into your PhD?
Yeah, so I'm going to be honest, I didn't do anything on superconductors in my undergrad. So I actually specialised in particle physics and atmospheric physics, thinking that I wanted to be a climate scientist. And I guess fusion is sort of related to climate and the climate change and stuff.
Yeah.
But there was an option to do superconductors, but I wanted to try atmospheric physics, see if that was what I wanted to do, and then decided that I didn't enjoy it. And I was in a bit of a panic then, because I haven't learned anything about fusion or superconductors or plasma physics. Will I still be able to do fusion as a PhD? But luckily, well, I was specifically on this training program where in my first year, I was given a whole series of lecture courses that taught me about fusion and superconductors. But I think that applies to a lot of PhDs. You get trained about all the basics of your PhD in the first year,
Okay.
and then you go on to start research maybe 6 months after you've done all that background research. So don't panic. You don't need to know much about your subject that you're doing your PhD in. But I think as long as you have the background knowledge, the physics and the maths of I don't know, cross products and Maxwell's equations. You should be, the classic equations, I think, you should have no problems whatsoever. So I was very, very pleased to hear this, really, being quite scared of being a lot further behind everyone. But I think also there's people from lots of different backgrounds, some engineers, some chemistry students, some physicists, they all come to do similar projects, either in superconductors or fusion. So we're all sort of newbies. So it's not a big deal if you haven't done any courses in your undergrad for your PhD.
Okay, that's good to hear, because I think it's really easy to kind of think I need to specialize really early. I need to know everything about this subject if I'm going to go into it. But from what you said, it seems to be actually quite a lot more open, and that there seems to be a lot more options available to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's something a lot of people can get scared about if they haven't heard otherwise. So yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I was wondering if there were any kind of particular reasons for you choosing to go into fusion physics instead of anything else.
Yeah, so I guess it's the cliche, oh, I learned about it at school and I was really inspired. But I think that's really true, because I think fusion's been going on it's been going on for quite a long time, but I don't think until recently it's been considered as something that's quite, in a way, important and exciting. So I guess by the time I got to the end of my degree, I decided I wanted to do something that would again, cliche, change the world. And I thought the climate situation, especially energy in general, like future energy, was a really big problem, because I think we've got around 100 years until our coal reserves run out for our energy from coal, and not only that, like we've got a growing population, we've got developing countries, we're going to be using like loads and loads more energy like in the future, so we're going to need to like increase our energy production alongside maintain it. And then again, we've got global warming to consider, so we need energy which is clean. And I feel like, although there's alternatives like wind and solar, and I think these are really fantastic, I just feel like I want to specifically focus on something that's bigger and will produce like a large scale, reliable amount of energy. So I guess that's why I decided, I decided fusion was the path that I wanted to take. I think also I like the ambition of it. Like there's a lot of I guess there's a lot of negativity associated with nuclear in general. Like people associate it with like fission and like danger and radioactivity and stuff. And there's also like a lot of pessimism because it's not like fusion's not a very researched technology. It might not even work. Could be like 100 years away if not much money is thrown into it, basically. So I guess I felt like, you know what, this is going to be a challenge. Let's just get involved and see what I can do, really. Like I feel like it's something that if it does work, it would be absolutely fantastic. And if it doesn't work, like it's almost like, oh well, I guess we tried at least.
It's worth giving it a shot.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a I guess a bit of a dream, really, a bit of an ambition. Yeah, but no, that's sort of what my mentality was towards going into fusion. Yeah,
I guess it's a much more kind of practical kind of research in its applications compared to something like more theoretical. In that, like, it's quite, I guess, easy to see that like there's a lot of good that can come out of fusion research.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess I have like a sneaky escape because superconductors have applications in lots of different areas. So if fusion doesn't work out, I've still got, I guess, quite a valid skill set for other areas.
Got your bases covered.
Yeah, got my jobs covered. No, but yeah, I hope that's some good information.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I guess I also wanted to ask you about more kind of a general PhD experience, because I think one of the first things that comes to mind when you think of PhD is like people giving you kind of horror stories of like being a slave to the grind, long nights, always staying in the lab. What are those like true in your experience? What would you have to say about those?
Yeah, I totally sympathise. I had that same sort of impression before I started my PhD. I think people I'd spoken to had said how it can be very demoralising and you have to be very independent. You just have to be really passionate enough to drive yourself and get up each day and know what to do and do independent reading to know what direction to go in. And so I guess I was a bit nervous starting a PhD, and especially because I went straight from undergrad. I went straight from undergrad to my PhD with just the summer holidays between. And I was a bit like, oh, maybe I just need some time out to decide what I want to do. But I guess it felt to me like a sort of road I was on. And I felt 4 years is a long time to get myself sorted, to figure out how it works. And it definitely does, like after the first year, you sort of work out what you need to do. And it's a bit overwhelming at first. But you sort of like, you just don't really like worry about that sort of expectation of having to, as you said, like work all the time. And yeah, it's just a very chilled atmosphere. Like definitely from my experience, I found it a lot calmer than doing an undergrad, because you basically, you can decide where your project goes. But that's not like an intimidating thing, because you can just say, oh, I haven't got any ideas today. I'm just going to leave it today and start again tomorrow or next week when I've got a bit more like of an idea and motivation to decide what I want to do. So it's very like laid back. It's like got all of those things like independent working, a lot of time management, being in control of yourself and your time. But then again, you've got like plenty of time to do this. Like you can just like go about it at your own time, just enjoy it, really. You don't have to treat it like like it's something you have to work at all the time. Like I guess it's quite easy to say that, but I sort of treat it like a 9-to-5 job, really. But then if there's days where I just feel like I'm going nowhere, I'll be like, right, it's better if I just stop now and then have a cup of tea, go for a nap, and then hopefully be in a better mindset the next day or something. Because like there's no point like trying to convince yourself to to try to convince yourself to generate these cool ideas when you just have nothing. Like, so yeah, I think, yeah, so my advice to anyone thinking about what they want to do after their degree or anything, just realize that a PhD is not as intimidating as a lot of people say. Like, it's very laid back, there's so much time to do anything, and even if like you don't like produce any significant results, it's all like, I think, yeah, a lot of people don't, to be fair. Like, it's all about developing skills, learning how to research, getting that experience, and if something like good comes out of it, that's like a bonus, really. But yeah, don't be hard on yourself. Like, it's difficult to produce anything new in a world where like there's a lot of things that have already been discovered. So discovering something new is really difficult. But yeah, so that's basically my general advice to doing a PhD.
Yeah, I think like when you're in like doing like A levels in undergrad, like you're like shown, I guess, this world of like science that's like already known, and like all you have to do is just kind of, you know, go through all the big stuff that's already known. But when you're like doing independent research, that's quite a big jump to like try to expand our knowledge.
Exactly. Yeah.
How would you say like there are any kind of challenges in adapting to that difference?
Yeah, I guess it's really hard when you feel like everything's already been known, everything's been done.
Yeah.
And trying to find something new on top of that. Like, that's something I've personally found really difficult. But I think the way I go about it is by starting really small. So like, you've learned so much at A levels and GCSEs, like you've basically covered the basics of physics, like all round knowledge of physics, and then you suddenly have to specialize in this tiny little thing where the maths become so much more complicated and detailed, and you just think, oh my goodness, like how am I going to build on this? Like, there's already so much that's been discovered, so many difficult equations. But I think that's sort of the good thing about it, is you can just really focus on that tiny thing. You can say, I'm not going to worry about any of this other physics. Maybe there's some other things I could use and like other equations that I could bring in, but at the moment I'm going to focus on this sort of tiny little research path. Like, set yourself a research question. Just say, for example, for me, my general research question is, how can I make stronger magnets for a fusion reactor? And then from that basic question, you then you sort of read some literature on that, and then take the equations from that and just work on those, basically. Like, don't try and sort of know everything about what is the plasma physics behind this. Just focus on your tiny little research question, because I think although you feel like you're specializing a lot and you're like dedicating a lot of your life to one tiny thing, it's going to produce like the most significant results, I think. But yeah, it is very overwhelming. I think especially when you've done A levels and you feel like you've learned a lot about everything, you feel very knowledgeable, and then you suddenly have to like throw away all that knowledge and focus on something very small. I think that's very demoralizing. But it's also, as I said, relieving to know that you don't have to know everything about everything. You can just really focus on one research question and know that that's going to make a big difference in the grand scheme. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. So I guess you're saying that you like kind of pick your scope and you like really zoom in.
Yeah.
I was wondering, have you found that like your scope that you of the really specific physics you're looking at has that changed, and do you think that might change more in the future?
I think that's a good point, actually. I think that has happened to a lot of students, actually. In fact, one I was talking to the other day, it just sort of comes up to me after a year, says, oh, I've had to completely change my project. Wow. Like, they've had to change basically the material that they were studying, which is their project, basically. And I think, oh my goodness, that must be really demoralizing to have to suddenly change route like that. And yeah, I haven't personally had to deal with that. I've sort of been focusing on something which me and my supervisor have decided is sort of the best I could be doing, really the best thing I could be doing in terms of the literature that's already out there, the research that's already been done. But I'm pretty sure that, you know, in the next couple years, they're going to have developed an even better superconductor, which is much better than the one that I'm testing for fusion reactors. And I think that's going to be, that's going to be a kick in the guts to have to like abandon what I'm working on and work on something else. And that's something that I do would struggle with, and I'm not sure how I would respond to it. But I think after like realizing like that is just science, like there's I think even you must experience in your undergrad, there's so many times where you think you've got it and you haven't, and you realize, oh, okay, it's a lot more complex than I thought it was. But I think it's just about keep going and don't worry about it, because you can only do your best, and you never know what the future's going to look like, and you never know what everyone else is doing as well. So you can only just focus on your little world and hope that, with enough networking, you can keep up with everyone. But there's always going to be that group that's ahead of you and has discovered like room temperature superconductivity, which they haven't told you about, and you're like, okay. So I think my take on that is to just sort of stick at your guns until something new information comes along, and then you have a reason to sort of feel bad about yourself. But it's all the beauty of science. Like, just remember, like, science is very changing and also very competitive as well. So that's sort of the downside of it, but it's just the way it is, I guess.
So do you have like your kind of superconductivity bubble which you're like keeping up to date with?
I guess we do, really. Like, it's kind of cute, really. We just have a group of us that love talking about superconductors. So like in Durham, there's a group of 5 of us, and we're all working on different parts of superconductivity. So 2 of us are experimental and two of us are computational. Oh no, three of us are experimental. And we sort of like help each other, and even though we don't know exactly what each other are doing, it's still like nice to like chat and try and learn and stuff. But it does become a bubble, I have to admit. Like, and I won't stress the importance of talking to people doing other PhDs that aren't in your area. So like, I think in the Durham physics department it's especially good, because we have like socials very often where we try and get everyone from the physics department to come for coffee and to chat about our work. So we're not just limited, I don't know, we don't just get into the PhD bubble where you just focus solely on yourself and nothing else. So it's important to just to learn about other people's projects. But as you said, like, it does become a bubble, and it's kind of wholesome in a way, but also sometimes it's nice to like realize there's other things in physics and life in general than your research. But
I'm picturing like high school-esque cliques of physicists.
We formed like those groups at school. You had like the group of physicists who just like talked physics and stuff, and the group of like humanities students which didn't like to mingle with the scientists. No, it's not too bad, not as bad as that.
Okay. I wanted to ask you more about the kind of social aspects of the PhDs, but I think first maybe we should have a bit of a break. So
Sure.
So we'll be back in 5 minutes for more Physics 5 See you soon. Hi everyone, I'm talking with Emma Gillard, a PhD student, telling me about the kind of process of doing a PhD, what it's like. And now, Emma, I was hoping you could tell me a bit about the kind of social aspect of doing a PhD.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I mentioned a bit before about it before the break, but I found doing a PhD can be a very isolating experience, and I think there's a lot of stereotypes around that as well. Like, I think there's a lot of associations with like lone working for long hours, sort of being in a lab on your own. And I guess in a way that is very true. Like, there's been days where I've just been in the lab on my own and like all day, and there's also been times where I've had to come in at the weekends because I'm running an expensive experiment which needs like attendance over the weekend, so I've had to come in over the weekend on my own, which is and I think those days I have found really difficult. So So yeah, I guess the truth is it can be very lonely at times, but um, but I think on the whole, a PhD experience is a very connecting experience. So one of the main advantages I've found of doing a PhD is the networking. So you have the opportunity to go to these conferences, maybe like yearly even, and here you'll meet with like people from all over the world or all over the country that are working on your area of research. And not only does this give you like direction for your work and inspiration, it also like you make friends from across the world. Like I have friends from like New Zealand, for example, and I would otherwise never have met anyone from New Zealand, I don't think. So you do like you do have like long, maybe a week, like maybe not even a week, I would say, just a few days of like intense work, and then it always like you're always working towards something where other people are as well, so you all get together and share that sort of experience of doing work and like finding this piece of doing this piece of research and finding something really interesting that you can connect with people and talk about. So I think that's been like a really real advantage there. And especially as doing a PhD, you're like associated with like a university or an institution, and you have people like maybe there's not so many PhD students as like undergrads, for example, but you're all like working on a PhD, you're all sort of lonely together in a way. So it's really easy to sort of meet up with people in the department and like just connect with them. So for example, like at Durham, there's maybe 5 of us in my group, and we're a very close group, so we always keep each other company. So I never feel like lonely then.
Aw.
And we always have stuff going wrong, so we're always moaning at each other, which is also quite nice because sometimes you feel like you're the only one that's going down a dead end with your research maybe some days. So it's good to have like those guys around. But then there's people from different parts of the department who like maybe study particle physics or astronomy, and like it takes a bit of effort, but we can all get together and like meet up for coffee now and again, because doing a PhD, it's not like a job in the sense that you have to work this set number of hours.
Right.
You can just walk in, walk out when you want, really. And you can like stop for tea if you're ever like going nowhere, getting stressed or overwhelmed. The best thing you can do is just stop for a cup of tea, and there's always someone in the department that's having the same sort of struggles as that, same experience. So it becomes like a little family, because you're all in it for about 4 years. So that's like enough time to form a really close network of friends.
That's nice.
And we have like regular coffee mornings, cake mornings, pub trips, where we always end up like talking about physics anyway. But you know, it's all good. It's all good, really. So I think, on the whole, I think there can be days where it's really lonely, but realizing that the next day, you'll have like a pub trip planned. So it's sort of, there's always something to look forward to. And it's very flexible as well. Like there's never like, I have to go to this thing at this time. It's like I can meet with somebody whenever I want, not like I have to arrange a particular time. So so that's my experience of the social side of it. Yeah.
Okay, that's actually quite more similar to kind of an undergrad experience than I would have thought it would be.
Yes, definitely. I think there's a lot of freedom to doing a PhD, like as well as an undergrad. Like although you sort of, I guess, treat it like a job, there's still like that freedom to go at your own pace and do the work you need to do, but in your own time in a way, as long as you're like getting it done and stuff. So like don't panic, don't think that it's going to be this really intense, draining 4 years of your life. It can be, I guess you can make it draining, but I would advise not to. I would advise to just mainly focus on enjoying it and making friends and learning stuff and just trying the best you can at it, but not beating yourself up, because it is likely to go wrong a lot of the time.
I'm glad that you say it's kind of like you get the sense that everyone's sort of in it together. I think like my favorite part of last year doing my undergrad was like kind of everyone coming together and cramming for exams at the end. Like start of like the final term, because like just like it's kind of stressful, but also like the sense that everyone's like in it together is really nice.
It's really nice actually, that feeling that you're all sort of struggling in a bad way, like that sounds bad, but to know that you're all like cramming, or you're all sort of struggling, you're all at a dead end, it's a nice sort of feeling to be in it with somebody, you know, instead of
Yeah, for sure.
being on your own through it. So yeah, I think it's a really sort of connecting social experience doing a PhD. Yeah, no, I definitely know that feeling. Yeah, the exam crams.
So another thing like about PhDs I wanted to ask you about is people say that like it's very important to kind of get like a good supervisor. I want to ask you about like your experiences with that.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to bring up, because I think one of the most important choices doing a PhD is choosing your supervisor. Like, I guess because you're stuck in 4 years with somebody, and I guess the relationship you have with your supervisor is one of the strongest relationships, and you need to make sure you get it right type thing. So that's probably one of the biggest, I think, after choosing what research project you want, I think choosing who you're going to research with like is really important. And I think one thing to realize is that there is a spectrum of supervisors, and it really depends on your character who you think you can work well with. So there's sort of, I guess, for two ends of the spectrum, there's the supervisor that is always looking over your shoulder, really pushing you to do more, work harder and get better results. And then on the other end, there's a supervisor that never like pays you any attention, doesn't really care what you're doing, but is kind of nice and gentle and hopes that you're well. So it's about sort of finding what personality you're best suited to there. I think, yeah, personally, I would like, I guess, somebody that, I guess in the middle really, somebody that will be interested in what I'm doing, but not too much that I feel like claustrophobic with it. But then I want them to also be like compassionate and laid back. So if something goes wrong, they're not going to give me stick about it.
Yeah.
Like if I destroyed a £1,000 thermometer, like I nearly did the other day. But yeah, so I think that's a really good point to bring up. And I think if you don't know your supervisor very well, it can make the 4 years quite difficult. So I think, therefore, like if you've done your undergrad at a university and you know maybe the supervisors quite well, it might be a good idea to sort of build a connection with those those professors and supervisors that you could do a PhD with. But I think if you're jumping into a completely different university, I think, yeah, it would be worth like definitely reading about their research, sort of meeting them in person quite a few times, and then like taking a long time to decide if you would work well with that person. Because I think it's definitely a more personal thing than a physics skill set thing. Like you can be really good at physics, but if your personalities clash, then it just won't work. So that's definitely a really good point and something to consider. Like the second most important thing I would say is choosing the right supervisor.
It really is quite important then.
Yeah. Yeah, but like you can always make it work. Like communication is really important as well. So
Okay. You mentioned that like if you are planning on doing like a PhD at the same place you were doing your undergrad, then you could kind of get to know people in advance. But I guess would you say it's kind of more worth doing a PhD somewhere different, or like what kind of advantages and disadvantages would you say there are to doing it somewhere different or at the same place you studied before?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, actually, and something I would like to bring up, because I did my undergrad at Oxford, and I was sort of considering staying at Oxford for another 4 years. And I decided in the end to move to Durham, as the project that I wanted was at Durham. And I got on well with my supervisor. And I think I'm very glad I made that move, because I know like almost everyone I've spoken to who has stuck at their university has ended up staying there for like 8 years of their lives, and they're sort of getting a bit fed up with it. And although they like know their supervisor really well and they have some really strong relations, I think they're sort of like ready to move on, like definitely. And I think for me, I think it's also more of a personal thing. So like for me, after 4 years at one place, I was sort of ready to move on.
Right.
And a lot of my undergraduate friends left anyway, so I would have had to basically start from scratch with friends. So there wouldn't be much advantage there to staying. And yeah, I think it's like a personal thing. Like if you're very, very happy somewhere, I think it's definitely worth staying. But if you're feeling like, oh yeah, I've seen this place, I kind of want to try a bigger city, for example, then yeah, I think moving there is better, because PhD is only one part of it. You know, there's the physics of doing your PhD, but then there's your whole life.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to really enjoy where you're living. You've got to enjoy the social aspect, the I don't know, the nightlife if you're into it. And so yeah, there's like, I think, yeah, one thing to realize about like university, I think as an undergraduate and a postgraduate, like that the work is only one part of it. Like it's a massive life experience, and you know, the step from A levels to undergrad is huge.
Yeah, for sure.
So like you need to I don't know, like I needed to realize that work is important, yes, but I think this is like a life journey, not just work. So there's so many things to consider.
Yeah, I think that's a helpful perspective. You can't just like kind of zero in on just the work aspect and nothing else.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about balance.
Okay, so I guess we're kind of coming up nearly to time. I wanted to ask if there were like any kind of general tips that you had to people thinking about applying to PhDs. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So my number one tip is to be, I think, to be confident, because I think with PhDs you can get a bit like lost. I think it's easy to get lost not only in your work but also in like sort of life in general, because it's a long time that you've dedicated your life to, like quite a long time doing this thing, and it's quite easy to feel like, oh, have I taken the wrong path? Is this not right? Like it's a long time. Am I really enjoying it? Is my work going anywhere? But I think you need to sort of have this mindset of, yes, it is going somewhere, even though it really doesn't feel like it. Like I think, yeah, have to be positive and confident in yourself, and that know that even though like it feels like you're going down lots of dead ends, you're slowly making progress, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back type thing. So I think, yeah, my general tip would be, yeah, to be confident in yourself, and to try and see it in a positive way, and then realize like even if nothing really good comes of it, there'll still be great like employment opportunities, and you would have a lot of like skills gained and experience, and they're all really positive things. So yeah, I think, yeah, to be positive and have confidence in what you're doing, I think, yeah, is my advice there.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about people having sort of like imposter syndrome when doing a PhD.
Yes, yeah, I think definitely, because you get people from loads of different backgrounds. There's people that have come from like the top universities and have like got like years of experience, and they have you feel like they have so much more to offer, but just realizing that you have a lot to offer as well. Like you have different things to offer, but you have equally valid things. So that's something to remember. Well, something I needed to remember. Yeah, that's a good point though. Imposter syndrome is a big problem. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're like thinking of like actually applying, what do you think people should sort of look out for when looking at projects?
Yeah, so I think you got to ask yourself, what was it at undergrad that I really enjoyed? Like it doesn't even have to be like what you feel like was the most useful way to spend your time. Like if you really enjoyed like hardcore maths, like you should think, yes, I need to do a theoretical PhD, I need to do the hardcore maths, and then decide like, what is it that I found either interesting or fulfilling to study? Like if you found it interesting to study like the Higgs boson or something, then like, yeah, do that and don't like hold back from it. But if you felt like more fulfilled having learnt about I guess like more material stuff, then I think, yeah, do that. Like do what sort of what sort of gave you the biggest like motivation at university as an undergraduate to do. Yeah, so I guess like sort of look around, look at all the options, but focus on the ones that sort of bring back good memories as an undergraduate, if you know what I mean. Like, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I think like we're pretty much out of time now, so thank you very much for coming to speak with us today.
Oh no, thank you for having me.
Is there anything that you'd like kind of like to plug or shout out? Like maybe if you have like a outreach website or anything like that?
Oh, I don't think so. I just want to say, like, stay in physics, guys. Like, it's a yeah, it's such a fantastic science, and I hope you all can sort of consider maybe PhD as an option for your future. But there's so much out there, so much to do. So just like speak to lots of different people, go to different things, and yeah, like stay in physics. Yeah, no, it's yeah, I don't really have any outreach stuff to mention, but
That's all right.
yeah.
Thank you everyone for listening. I'll see you soon for more Physics by Robert. Bye.